Hello, my name is Madison Walker, and today we're going to talk about heifer development and nutrition. So, why is developing heifers important to producers? Oftentimes, one of the biggest costs we have after feed is replacing the animals that we culled every year to maintain our herd size, or some cases, we're looking to increase that herd size. So, we know that good practice is to cull heavy and get rid of those animals that aren't being productive for us anymore. But we've got to replace them if we want to keep our herd the same. And oftentimes that means purchasing new animals, and that's a good strategy. But for some producers, raising their own replacements makes more sense, whether it's they have a good system of genetics that they like at their own home place and they can't find anything they like somewhere else that they kind of want to keep, or maybe they have a lot of cropland and can get the feed cheaply, or there's a variety of reasons why someone would want to raise their own heifers. But the nutrition of those animals is vitally important to making sure that they're going to become productive and last in the herd a long time and produce good calves for us so that whatever we invest in them pays off. So there's a couple of goals we're looking at here. Ideally, we want this heifer to grow up into a productive cow for us and last in our herd for 6, 7, 8 years. And in order for her to do that, the biggest hurdle to overcome is after she's had her first calf, getting her bred back to have that second calf within a reasonable time. So within our 45 to 60 day breeding season, whatever you've got on your farm there. And in order for her to do this, there's a couple of targets that we need to hit. So we want her to hit puberty about 45 days before the start of her first breeding season. It's going to be somewhere between 11 and 13 months of age for most animals. And in order for her to do this, we need her to hit about 60 to 65% of her mature body weight. So if you've got a bunch of cows that are pretty similar, you can kind of calculate what the average weight of those animals is and figure out what your average target weight is that you're looking for those heifers to hit. Then once we get her there and we get her bred, we want to try to push her to about 80 to 85% of her mature body weight as she's pregnant with that first calf. So we want her to be at 85% by the time that first calf hits the ground and in good body condition, about a 6, so that she'll have an easier time getting bred back and having another calf for us. And, these kinds of things, they don't just happen overnight. So it kind of starts the second she hits the ground as a calf. And there's not a lot of studies on the pre-weaning nutrition of replacement heifers, because at this time, a lot of people don't know which heifers they're going to keep, which heifers they're going to sell, and they're kind of all treated the same. The biggest thing to keep in mind with the pre-weaning stuff is we want them to have a high plane of nutrition. So creep feeding is usually a good idea, but we want to be mindful that we're either separating contemporary groups, or we don't want to overfeed our oldest animals, because we know that oftentimes our oldest animals have the best chance of being replacements since they are older and have a little longer to develop and mature from a reproductive side. But if we overfeed them and they deposit fat in their udder, there's a lot of studies that show a decrease in milk yield for the rest of her life, which results in decreased weaning weights for her calves, and that's lost money. So we want to be cognizant of that. Once we do wean her, though, this is most often when people make their selections of which animals are going to become replacements and which ones are going to go to be fed out with the steers. And this is a good time to develop a ration for those specific heifers. And we're really looking at something pretty conservative here. We want a grain-based diet because it's been shown that high carbohydrate diets are more effective than forage-based diets, but we don't want her to gain more than about 1.5 pounds a day. And we don't want to push her past that body condition score of 6. So there has been some studies that show that it's okay if we hold them back for the first month or so and just have them about 1 pound a day, and then push them really hard at the end to closer to that 2.5, 3 pounds a day. As long as they average out to about 1.5 over that whole time period, we're going to be okay there. Some other things to consider in this time is adding monensin or another ionophore to the diet. It's been shown to decrease the age at puberty and increase the number of heifers that are cycling at the beginning of the breeding cycle. Speculated this is mostly due to increased performance and weight gain and things like that. There's a lot of economics that go into that, but we just want to make sure that we're feeding them at a high plane of nutrition, but again, not overfeeding. The fat deposition in the udder at this point is going to be negative to milk yield. So here we go. It's the beginning of the breeding season. We've done our reproductive tract scores and culled those heifers that are 3 or lower, and we've decided which ones we're going to breed. At this point, you should get pretty good pregnancy rates on 2 AIs with a natural service cleanup bull, and it's going to become a question of what are we going to do with those heifers that are bred. And the first and second trimester is not really a huge deal. We still want them to have a little bit better quality hay than your mature cows because they are still growing. So if we're feeding hay or on pasture, we want to put them on our better stuff. And maybe we need to look into a little supplemental feeding, but we're not pushing them really hard here in the first two trimesters because they're going to be naturally gaining, and we just want to make sure we can maintain that kind of pound and a half a day gain. The third trimester, so about the last 60 days of pregnancy, is when we're going to have to supplement a good deal because the growth of that fetus takes off exponentially in this point, and her demands are going through the roof, and we need to make sure we meet them, and we need to follow NRC recommendations for basically energy is usually the biggest factor there that we're going to be missing out on. Some other things we want to consider is not overfeeding protein, especially at this point. It's kind of common to try to do that if we're just increasing our ration. We really need to focus on increasing the energy in that ration, because overfeeding protein will increase the urea and the ammonia concentrations, alter the pH of the uterus, and can decrease fertility in some ways. So we've pushed her and we've got her to where she's gaining just right, and she's about 85% of her body weight, or her mature body weight, when that first calf hits the ground. Ideally, she's in body condition 6. This is going to help her get through the uterine involution period faster, and she's going to lose some condition. And in about 30 days there, when she's in peak lactation of feeding that calf, she's going to be a negative energy balance, and is not going to be able to eat enough to keep up with her own body in the calf and producing a milk. So we still want to feed them well at this time, and then about 45 days later, at the start of our next breeding season, hopefully they get bred for us again. And after that, she's going to be a mature cow. Before the third trimester, she'll be at her full grown mature size and weight, and we can kind of just treat her as another member of the herd. But it's one of those things to focus on. And some other considerations are just how we're delivering the feed. We don't ever want to commingle our replacement heifers with our mature cows, because they're going to get pushed out of the feed bunk. They're not going to get their fair share, and we're going to have a bunch of overconditioned mature cows and a lot of heifers that are struggling to get bred or struggling to start cycling. And a lot of guys tend to kind of dry lot their heifers and breed them and then turn them out to graze. And there's some studies that show that that's kind of a bad idea, and they tend to lose condition for the first week there because they've forgotten how to graze. So we either want to keep them on pasture and bring the feed to them so that their whole life they're used to walking around eating grass and the feed's just supplemented there. Or if we are going to dry lot them and confine feed them from weaning to breeding, we need to keep them in that confinement for at least 30 days after they're bred to make sure that they stay bred before we turn them out to pasture, and they're going to go into that negative plane of nutrition. So those are some other things to consider from a delivery standpoint. But all in all, heifer development is a big topic. It can be very, very expensive, but it can be very rewarding, and it can pay off in the long run. But we just have to be mindful of the different stages of production and tailoring our diet to fit those animals' needs. Thank you.